The roses arrived exactly at noon on Valentine's Day. I wasn't expecting any deliveries since Thomas and I had broken up 3 months ago. The doorbell's chime echoed through my empty house, and when I opened the front door, there was nothing but a dozen blood-red roses wrapped in black paper. No card, no note, just those perfect crimson blooms against the stark February sky. I should have thrown them away. The rational part of my brain screamed at me to toss them in the garbage, but something made me bring them inside. Maybe it was the lingering guilt over how things ended with Thomas, or perhaps just the loneliness of another Valentine's Day alone. I found my grandmother's crystal vase in the kitchen cabinet and arranged them carefully, trying to ignore the growing unease in my stomach. The roses seemed to watch me as I moved around the kitchen preparing dinner that evening. Their deep red petals appeared almost black in the fading light, and their sweet fragrance had grown overwhelmingly thick. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Thomas had never sent me black-wrapped flowers before. He'd always chosen cheerful pink paper with white ribbons, and he wasn't the type for dramatic gestures after a breakup. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house settling made me jump. Around 2 a.m., I heard a car drive slowly past my house, engine purring low and steady. Through my bedroom window, I watched its taillights disappear around the corner, only to return 10 minutes later for another pass. My fingers trembled as I reached for my phone to call the police. But what could I tell them? That I was scared of roses and a car driving on a public street? I double-checked all the locks and set the security system before forcing myself to lie back down. The roses' scent had somehow crept upstairs, their sickly sweet perfume filling my nostrils. As I finally drifted off, my phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number. Did you like the flowers? My heart stopped. I blocked the number immediately, but sleep was impossible now. The next morning, I called in sick to work and started digging. Thomas had moved to Seattle after our breakup. I'd seen it on his sister's Instagram. Could he have sent the flowers from there? I searched local news reports, and that's when I found it. 3 women in neighboring counties had reported receiving anonymous roses on Valentine's Day last year. 2 weeks later, one of them disappeared. They never found her body. My hands shook as I read more. The missing woman, Sarah Chen, had broken up with her boyfriend 4 months before the flowers arrived. The police investigation went nowhere. No witnesses, no body, no closure. The case went cold. The other women had reported being stalked for weeks after receiving the roses, but nothing could ever be proven. I installed cameras that afternoon. Every entrance, every window. I changed the locks. I bought motion sensors and a video doorbell. The roses still sat in their crystal vase, but now they felt like a warning. Their petals had started to curl at the edges, darkening to an almost purple shade. The water in the vase had turned cloudy, despite my changing it that morning. The texts started coming from different numbers. You can't block me forever. I miss watching you sleep. The roses are dying, but my love isn't. Each one made my skin crawl. The police took a report but said they couldn't do anything without proof of an actual threat. They suggested I stay with friends or family, but I refused to be driven from my own home. 1 week after Valentine's Day, my phone woke me at 3:47 a.m. with a motion alert. Someone was in my backyard. The security camera footage showed a dark figure moving through my garden, stopping to peer through windows. I called 911 with trembling fingers, trying to stay quiet in case they could hear me. The police arrived 6 minutes later, but the figure was gone. They found footprints in the mud and signs that someone had been watching the house for days. Cigarette butts under the kitchen window, trampled plants behind the garage. An officer said I was lucky I had good locks and an alarm system. Lucky, as if luck had anything to do with surviving a stalker. I took a leave of absence from work and spent my days investigating. I created a timeline of Sarah Chen's disappearance, looking for any connection to my case. The only link I could find was that we'd both used the same dating app 2 years ago. I scrolled through hundreds of profiles, looking for familiar faces, any clue that might help. My eyes burned from staring at screens, but I couldn't stop. The breaking point came when I found the photo album in my attic. I'd gone up there looking for an old laptop that might have dating app messages stored on it. Instead, I found a leather-bound album I'd never seen before. Inside were photos of me, sleeping, shopping, checking my mail, pictures spanning months, all taken without my knowledge. On the last page was a fresh photo of the roses he'd sent me, still in their black paper wrapper on my doorstep. He'd been in my house. The realization hit me like a physical blow. He'd been in my house while I slept, planted that album for me to find. A note fell from between the album's pages. "You'll be mine again next Valentine's Day." The handwriting was unfamiliar, but I recognized the black paper it was written on, the same as the rose's wrapper. I moved out that night, left everything except what would fit in my car. I drove straight to the police station and showed them the album. This time, they listened. They took the photos as evidence, dusted for prints, interviewed neighbors. They found partial fingerprints that didn't match anyone in their database. Dead end. My new apartment is a fortress. Top floor, double locks, cameras everywhere. I changed my name, deleted all social media, switched jobs. I haven't heard from him in months. But Valentine's Day is coming again. And every time I close my eyes, I see those roses. Their deep red petals curling into darkness. Their scent a warning I should have heeded. This morning I found a single red rose on my welcome mat. No paper, no note, just one perfect bloom as red as blood on snow. And I know, with terrifying certainty, that he's found me again. The roses are just the beginning. They always are. My Valentine's Day photography bookings started disappearing 3 months ago. As a content creator specializing in romantic lifestyle shoots, February was always my busiest season. But one by one, my regular clients began canceling their sessions, all switching to a new photographer in town, someone called Forever Moments Studio. The first time I saw Forever Moments work, something felt off. Their photos were technically perfect, too perfect. Every couple posed identically, with the same vacant smile, the same head tilt, the same hand placement. Even their eye color seemed to match, regardless of the couple. But their follower count was skyrocketing, and their Valentine's packages were selling out months in advance. I tried to book a behind-the-scenes tour of their studio, claiming I was a photography student. Their equipment list made no sense. Vintage large-format cameras that hadn't been manufactured since the 1920s, specialized lenses with impossible specifications, and something called a soul light modifier that I couldn't find any reference to online. Their studio was located in an old Victorian mansion on the outskirts of town. The building had been abandoned for decades until Forever Moments bought it last year. The renovation happened overnight. No contractors, no permits, no paper trail. One day, it was a derelict shell. The next, it was a fully functioning studio with blacked out windows and sophisticated security systems. Local wedding magazines couldn't get enough of their work. Every issue featured another Forever Moments couple, each looking more eerily perfect than the last. I started collecting the magazines, comparing the photos. The couple's faces were different, but their expressions were identical. Their eyes all had the same glassy sheen, like dolls' eyes. I managed to get my hands on one of their client contracts. The legal language was bizarre. Clauses about image permanence and essence capture, requirements for clients to provide DNA samples for color correction purposes, and a waiver for something called soul rights. The contract was dated 1895, with only the company name and address updated. During a wedding expo, I borrowed a light meter to analyze their display prints. The readings were impossible. The light seemed to come from inside the photographs themselves. When I tried to photograph their booth, my camera malfunctioned. The images came out distorted, showing empty chairs where the sample couples had been sitting. Their social media growth defied all analytics. New followers appeared in perfect geometric progressions. Comments repeated in exact patterns. Every photo received precisely 666 likes within the first hour, no matter when it was posted. The engagement was real. I checked. But it was like their entire online presence was following some ancient mathematical formula. I started tracking their booking patterns. Every couple who took their Valentine's photos at Forever Moments disappeared from social media exactly 14 days later. Their accounts weren't deleted, they just stopped posting. No wedding photos, no honeymoon updates, nothing. As if they'd stepped out of the world the moment their perfect photos were captured. The breakthrough came when I found their chemical supplier's invoices in a dumpster. They weren't ordering normal photography supplies. These were preservatives, embalming fluids, and something listed only as essence fixative. The quantities were massive, enough to process hundreds of bodies. Or, I realized with growing horror, hundreds of souls. I broke into their storage room last night. The walls were lined with identical black albums, each labeled with a year. Inside, the same photos repeated endlessly. Different faces, same poses, same expressions, same glassy eyes. The earliest album was from 1895. The couples hadn't aged in their subsequent photos. They hadn't changed at all. Their cameras weren't just for taking pictures. Each one was modified with brass attachments and crystal lenses that seemed to pulse with their own light. The viewfinders showed more than they should. Layers of reality, traces of movement from photos taken decades ago. Through them, every subject appeared as both their current self and what they would become. In the main office, I found their appointment book. Each session was marked with 2 dates, the shoot day and something called the preservation date, exactly 14 days later. Next to each couple's name was a number, like a measurement, 47 years, 61 years. They weren't selling photos, they were selling time. The photo release forms told the real story. By signing, couples weren't just giving up rights to their images, they were giving up rights to their future. Forever Moments wasn't preserving memories, they were preserving people, trapping them in an eternal moment of perfect happiness. The photos weren't copies, they were cages. Their Valentine's Day schedule is fully booked. 27 couples, all coming for their perfect photos. 27 more pairs of glassy eyes, frozen smiles, and stolen futures. I've called the police, but who would believe me? How do you explain that a photography studio is stealing souls through modified Victorian cameras? I'm going back tonight to destroy the cameras before Valentine's Day. If you're reading this, learn from my final shot, the one I took of their empty studio, where the shadows move on their own and every mirror reflects a different year. Some memories aren't meant to be preserved. Some moments shouldn't last forever. And if you've booked a Valentine's session with Forever Moments, cancel it. That perfect photo they're promising, it's not worth the eternity you'll spend inside it. Nobody thinks about what happens to undeliverable Valentine's cards. As a returns processor at the National Undeliverable Mail Facility, that's my entire job. Handling the love letters, cards, and packages that never reach their intended recipients. Every February, our facility processes thousands of returned Valentine's Day items, each one a little story of disconnection, loss, or missed connection. 3 weeks ago, we started receiving Valentine's cards marked with peculiar red tags. Not our standard return to sender stickers. These were different, with an odd metallic sheen and no postal markings. They appeared in batches, always precisely 13 cards, always addressed to people who had vanished without a forwarding address. The first card I opened was against protocol. We're supposed to either return undeliverable mail or send it to the dead letter office. But something about the handwriting caught my attention. It was too perfect, each letter identical as if printed by a machine trying to imitate human writing. Inside was a simple message, "You're next, February 14th. When I checked the tracking history, things got stranger. According to our system, these cards had never been mailed. They showed no point of origin, no postmark, no routing information. Yet somehow they'd appeared in our facility, perfectly sorted into the undeliverable section, each one tagged with those odd red labels. I started cross-referencing the addressees. Every recipient had disappeared within the past 5 years, all around Valentine's Day. No bodies were ever found. The missing persons reports all mentioned the same detail. Each victim had received a Valentine's card shortly before vanishing. The cards were never found. In the basement archives, I found records dating back to 1876, when our facility first opened. Every February, like clockwork, 13 undeliverable Valentine's cards would appear. The descriptions matched perfectly. Red tags, mechanical handwriting, threatening messages. And every year, 13 people would vanish without a trace. The security footage showed nothing. The cards simply appeared between camera sweeps as if materializing from thin air. I watched hundreds of hours of recordings. At exactly 3:33 a.m. each morning, there would be a split second of static. When the image cleared, a new batch of cards would be there, neatly stacked and tagged. I contacted a postal inspector friend. She discovered similar cases at other facilities across the country. Always 13 cards, always around Valentine's Day, always followed by disappearances. The pattern was spreading. What started in one facility in 1876 had spread to dozens. This year, hundreds of cards had appeared nationwide. The lab results from the red tags came back inconclusive. The material wasn't paper or plastic. It had an organic component that the analysts couldn't identify. Under microscopic examination, the surface seemed to shift and change like living tissue. The ink contained traces of human DNA. I mapped every disappearance, every facility where the cards had appeared. The pattern formed a perfect spiral, expanding outward from our facility. We weren't just the first, we were the center. Whatever was sending these cards had started here, and it was growing, spreading across the postal system like a virus. The facility's original logbooks revealed more. In 1876, a postal worker named Elizabeth Kane had disappeared while processing undeliverable Valentine's cards. Her final log entry mentioned strange red marks appearing on the mail and a feeling of being watched. 13 more workers vanished that year. Their bodies were never found. Last night, I found markings on the sorting equipment, the same symbols that appear on the red tags, etched into the metal. They looked old, but I'd never noticed them before. When I touched them, they were warm. The security cameras caught me tracing them with my finger. In the footage, it looks like the symbols are moving. This morning, an internal memo announced that our facility will process all nationwide undeliverable Valentine's mail this year. Some computer error has rerouted everything to us. We're expecting over 10,000 pieces of returned mail. Among them will be 13 cards with red tags, 13 more victims. Unless I can stop it. I've been going through the dead letter office, looking for patterns, clues, anything that might help. The shelves seem to go on forever, filled with lost messages and forgotten love letters. Sometimes I hear whispers from deep in the stacks, like distant voices reading those undelivered words. The red tags are spreading, appearing on more letters every day. The numbers don't make sense anymore. We're processing more mail than we receive. Letters disappear from sealed bags, only to reappear days later with red tags. The sorting machines run at night when they should be powered down. Every morning, we find them warm to the touch, surrounded by perfectly sorted stacks of undeliverable Valentines. Today, I found a card addressed to me. The handwriting was perfect, mechanical, identical to all the others. The red tag seemed to pulse in the fluorescent light. I haven't opened it yet, but I know what it says. Tomorrow is February 14th. If you're reading this, stay away from your mailbox. Some Valentine's cards aren't meant to be delivered. Some messages should stay lost in the system forever.